Welcome to the College Admissions Process Podcast presented by Prep Expert. Prep Expert offers live online SAT and ACT courses with the best score guarantees, instructors, and curriculum. Go to prepexpert.com to guarantee your child's success. What's up, podcast friends, and thank you for listening to the College Admissions Process Podcast. While analyzing the podcast data, I realized that many of the earlier episodes, some of which received the most overall downloads and are still extremely relevant today, are not being listened to as much as the newly released episodes. This is why I created the alphabetical list of colleges available on the podcast with the link to the related interview to the right of each school. Please use the alphabetical list as part of your college search, which can be found in the show notes and on my website, www.collegeadmissionstalk.com. The alphabetical list serves as an on-demand virtual college fair with schools from throughout the country. To highlight how valuable the alphabetical list is, I will release past episodes that receive the highest overall downloads on Wednesdays throughout the summer. Please share the alphabetical list with anyone you think that may benefit, as it has proven to be such a valuable tool for so many listeners. So are you ready? Let's talk about it. Welcome to the CAP, the College Admissions Process Podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today Brendan Corsones, who's the Associate Director of Admissions at the University of Notre Dame. Brendan, thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
I'm doing great, John. Thanks so much for having me. I'm joining you with a light dusting of snow out here in South Bend, and we're prepping for hosting, the first ever home college football playoff game next Friday. So a lot of buzz.
That's
out here on
awesome.
campus.
That's awesome. Well, good luck to Notre Dame. And, luckily right now there's no snow in New York, but you never know. You could get snow any time of year here in New York.
Absolutely.
So, Brendan,
I'm originally from Vermont, John. So my parents have told me they have a lot, so I might be heading your way soon.
well, that's awesome. It'll be great to see you in person. And Brendan, my first interview with Notre Dame was episode 65, which was released back in September of 2022. It's a long time ago.
Mhm.
Since then, what can you share in terms of what's new on campus related to your academic program, student life, or frankly, anything else that you want to share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're kind of fortunate that there's certainly always, I think, a lot of activity and growth going on campus, but a few kind of new initiatives that I think would be important to highlight, especially related to the admissions process, is that we did just announce a new initiative called the Pathways Initiative, related to helping to remove some financial barriers for students applying to and those admitted to Notre Dame. We're certainly very highly committed to making Notre Dame more affordable and more accessible for prospective students. And I think with the Pathways Initiative, we have a couple of really exciting new endeavors that we're taking on related to that. So we're very proud that for a long time now, we have been committed to meeting full demonstrated need for every student that is admitted to Notre Dame. But with the Pathways Initiative, we are now moving to loan-free packaging in order to meet that full demonstrated need. So we will include no packaged loans as part of our financial aid offer, so that full demonstrated need is going to be met purely through university gift aid and also federal work study should a student qualify. And then along with the loan-free packaging, we are also moving to a need-blind admissions model for international students. So we're very proud to be just the 9th university in the United States that is both need-blind for international students as well as meeting that full demonstrated need. So that was just announced a few months ago, but we're very excited certainly to again making Notre Dame a more accessible place for prospective students from all around the world. I also, love to highlight our continued investment in research opportunities on our campus as well. We recently were invited to and accepted an invitation to join the Association of American Universities, or the AAU, which is a group of 71 universities, I believe, in the United States dedicated to top-tier research opportunities for students and really resource sorts towards the common good. We are the only faith-based institution that's a member of the AAU. So very much about kind of combining a modern Catholic liberal arts education with very just robust experiential learning opportunities within a student's chosen field. Very proud to be a member of the AAU now. And then I'll give you just one kind of new facility on campus that we
Hmm.
did open up as well too, the brand new Museum of Art on campus, which is a
Wow.
beautiful new world-class art museum. Yeah, I commonly will get emails from prospective students and families saying, we've already visited a few times before. What's something new for us to see? I'm glad that I now have an answer to that question. I always say visit the Racklin Carmichael Museum. Really beautiful new facility that we have now, world-class art museum that we're very excited about.
Well, that is definitely very exciting. And you pointed it out in the beginning lots of activities, lots of growth. And I love that you talked about your Pathways initiative to
Mhm.
remove financial barriers and, frankly, to meet full demonstrated need. You also mentioned that you're need blind for your international students. And I know there's a lot of international students that actually listen to the podcast episodes. But,
Wonderful.
Brendan, the listeners are very smart out there. They're well educated. However, how can someone determine their demonstrated need? Is that something that they could do in terms of using your net price calculator? Or what are some of the things that they can do to get a better understanding of what the ticket price would be
Yeah.
to attend Notre Dame before they even get accepted?
Yeah, that's a great question, John, because, oftentimes students do look at the sticker price, for a university, Notre Dame or elsewhere, but they don't realize that really, what the cost to your family can vary, quite widely depending on, a student or a family's financial situation. So certainly there are, I think, some good tools out there to help kind of see what is the out of pocket cost going to look like for my family. The net price calculator, as you mentioned, is certainly a nice tool. You can access that through our financial aid website. Many universities will also have the net price calculator available through their financial aid website. We do also have a tool called the My Intuition calculator as well too. That's a bit of a briefer kind of overview that students can use filling out some basic financial information. We do also have, John, I think a very helpful chart that's posted on our financial aid website that uses data from students last year that will give students a table of family income ranges, and then it will give the average kind of both cost as well as the average financial aid offer for families that fall within those income brackets as well. And of course, that's not exact because we'll use more than just income when determining the financial aid offer, but at least it allows families to see, okay, so similar families to mine last year, this is the type of financial aid offer they were receiving. So that's kind of a much briefer, I think, way to get a bit
Right.
of an estimate for yourself there.
Well, I'm glad I asked that question because obviously financial aid is something that's been coming up more and more in so
Mhm,
many of the conversations. And the advice to students and their parents is to have the financial conversation early and
mhm,
often so that students understand which schools they should or shouldn't be applying to in terms
mhm,
of what the family can afford. We mentioned using the net price calculator. You mentioned the My Intuition site. And also on your own financial aid site, you have a lot of data to show students and their families in terms of what they may be paying if, in fact, accepted to the great school of Notre Dame. So I was also curious, how would you describe the campus culture, which I know is phenomenal, and talk to us about student life at Notre Dame and what are some of the key student organizations, for example, and
yeah.
traditions that make the university so unique?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an important point, John. I just wanted to say that you said about kind of having those financial conversations early, doing that research early
Sure.
to see what that looks like. I have an 18-month-old son at home, so we're easing
Congratulations.
into it. He can't quite talk yet, but we'll start those
Congratulations.
conversations. Yeah, soon enough. Thank you. But yeah, in terms of I think kind of defining like the campus culture and in community that we have on our campus, there are always kind of a few I think key traits that I really like to highlight that I think makes Notre Dame just such a special place. And the first one I really do kind of like to point out is just the idea of a very like supportive community that you're going to find at Notre Dame. I think we're very fortunate that we really are kind of bringing in the best and the brightest students from really all around the world to come to Notre Dame. Our campus is located in northern Indiana. Our average freshman this year traveled about 750 miles to come to campus. So they're
Wow.
coming from all 50 states, all around the world. I'm actually actually glad, John, you said you had a lot of international listeners. I work with a lot of international students.
Awesome.
I'm the territory manager for Brazil, Central America, and several Middle Eastern countries as well, too.
Terrific.
So I think that no matter really where students are from, they really come to make Notre Dame their home. And you're not going to find like an overly competitive atmosphere. They really come because they want to be a part of this collaborative community that works together and really helps each other to reach their full potential, that I think is really special. Coming from Vermont, I'm not from Notre Dame's backyard. I'm an alum myself, but even though it was far from home, I never felt alone at Notre Dame. And I think that that's really special, like in the dorms, in the classrooms, and all around campus. That idea of a supportive community is very special. I would also just say, too, in general, a very passionate and curious student body as well, too. That students at Notre Dame do not just kind of go to class, go back to their dorm
Hmm.
room, do their homework, and that's it. They
Right.
come with a lot of passions and they want to be involved in them outside of the classroom as well, too. And I think not only follow their passions, but having that kind of curiosity to step outside of their comfort zone, to try new things, to be brave, and to discover new passions as well, too. And a lot of that intellectual curiosity goes into the classroom as well, that we offer a very kind of like flexible and well-rounded curriculum. And I think just kind of the culture really is one of exploration, that you're not only taking classes in your chosen field, but you are trying new things. You're taking that interdisciplinary education, very common for students to add on a minor, a double major, change their mind, try something new. And we encourage that exploration that I think can be really great, John, I would say. And then kind of finally, and I think a lot of this really goes kind of along with our mission and our faith-based and Catholic identity that we have at Notre Dame, is an idea really based on giving back and, kind of using your education and experience to serve those around you as well, too. I think really built into our mission from the very beginning is the idea of forming students to really be forces for good in the world. And our students take that mission and identity seriously, to really use their experience to give back on campus and beyond while at Notre Dame and as an alum as well, too. So that kind of spirit of service and giving back, I think, is very important to our overall culture as well, I would say.
Well, I appreciate that. You really brought home the point of a supportive community. You talked about your student body that is very curious, not afraid to step out of their comfort zone. And I appreciate you talking about your mission and how it's really focused on service and giving back. And I
Mhm.
repeat all of these things because students, as you're doing your research and you're really trying to understand the philosophies of the different colleges and universities, it's very important to listen to what the reps are saying about their student body. Because if that speaks to you, if that resonates in terms of who you are, make sure you're showing off those things as part of your overall application,
Mhm.
which we're going to, dissect in a couple of minutes here. But make sure if that's something that resonates with you, that you demonstrate how you understand their mission and philosophy, what you've done in high school, which is in line with that mission and philosophy, and showcase it in whether it's your personal essay or your supplemental essay, whatever it is, because that will help you in the overall process. Now, I also know that Notre Dame has a notably high retention rate. I just read that it's at 98%, which is
Mhm.
unbelievable. And that means the percentage of students who return for sophomore year. For those unfamiliar, the retention rate is an important metric that reflects how well a university supports its students academically, socially, and of course, emotionally. As again, it indicates how many first year students continue into that second year. Why do you think Notre Dame's retention rate is so high? And what factors do you believe contribute to students feeling connected and supported enough to stay year after year? In addition to everything that you shared, what else do you have for us, Brendan?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an important question because we certainly are very fortunate to have that retention rate that does hover right around 98%, each year. And I think a few factors I would highlight a bit. I did mention, I think, the supportive community, but I do want to go a little bit deeper into our residential life that we have on our campus as well, too, because it is a little bit unique and does tend to play an important role in overall student life at Notre Dame. Currently, we have 32 dorms on campus. They are single sex men's dorms and women's dorms that students are going to be randomly assigned to when they kind of first arrive. But the dorms really are, I think, very special because they do kind of become like a student's home really from the moment that they arrive. And students find their community in many different ways at Notre Dame, and in class, in the clubs and organizations that they decide to join. But I do think it's very special to have this kind of home and this family to come back to through your residence hall when you first get there. So there's kind of that very strong sense of like community and identity that comes along with the residence halls on campus. And typically students will also stay in the same residence hall during their 3 or 4 years on campus. So I think it definitely helps our first year students that there are going to be sophomores and juniors and seniors living all around them. So in addition to the support they have with the rector, the assistant rectors, the RAs or resident assistants that are all seniors on our campus, they also just have their peers there, to really help them to make this transition, to have this kind of built-in support system around them. I think to help them make not only that social transition to Notre Dame, but also for academic help as well too, because you have these upperclassmen that have already gone through many of the same transitions you'll be going through, that have asked a lot of the ssame questions, taken a lot of the same classes, that you're going to, that you can kind of rely on to go through that process, because there are always going to be bumps in the road. It's never going to be perfect that first year of college, I don't think, but it's nice to kind of have this community and support system around you in the dorms when you first arrive. I certainly would also highlight academically, our advising staff does a wonderful job in helping our students as well too. Oftentimes you will be working with the same advisor during your entire time at Notre Dame, so you really build that long-term relationship. I think you're always very comfortable going to them with questions, whether in your regular meetings or they just keep a very open door policy, especially for first year students that are inevitably going to have those questions. They certainly are very willing and eager to engage with students to help you as you're making that transition. And if you do need that extra support, being able to direct you, to the university writing center, to the math center to help with making that transition, or different tutoring that's offered by our various academic colleges. So certainly you have that advising and academic support as well too. And then also, John, I talked a little bit kind of earlier about like the ability to explore academically. I also think that really helps our students too, because it means that just because your academic path changes, your passions change in the classroom, I think that Notre Dame still allows you to see a future and be able to discern a path for yourself right here at Notre Dame, because we really do
Right.
kind of encourage this exploration to find the right path for you. And we kind of show you that Notre Dame can provide that path regardless of what those passions may be. So I think all of those factors kind of together, I think to really help contribute to that high retention rate, I would say.
Well, that was definitely a comprehensive answer. And I love how you turned first to the residential life with your over 30 dorms and how they really are communities and foster a tremendous support system. And clearly, you are mindful of the transition from the hundreds, if not thousands, of high schools that students are coming from over the years to that awesome place that we call Notre Dame. And I, repeat all of that because for students and parents, for your own research, it's not a bad question to ask a college or a university. What is it that you do to help students to transition from high school where mom and dad are right there, your guidance counselor or your school counselor is right there? There are so many things right there, people telling you what to do, when to do it, how to do it. And then you go to this huge university with people from hundreds of different high schools out of the country, out of the state that you're from. So it's really a good question to ask when you're doing your own research. So again, we really appreciate, Brendan, that comprehensive answer.
Mhm.
So let's get into the application review by first simply asking, what are the different ways for a student to apply to Notre Dame? And what I'm talking about, of course, is early decision, early action, or whatever else. And is there a benefit to applying one way over the other in terms of not only being admitted, but also for being considered for merit-based scholarships?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. Actually, I think a good one to be asking us because we are a little bit unique when it comes to our early application plan. So, unlike other schools where you may hear the more common terms, which would be early action, the non-binding plans, or early decision, that are going to be those binding plans with an obligation to attend if admitted. We're what's called restrictive early action, which means we are still early action, so it is still non-binding. You are not required required to attend Notre Dame. If you are admitted, we're actually going to be releasing our restrictive early action decisions Tuesday of next week. So we are gearing up for all of that. We're in the thick of it right now. But the restricted part of restrictive early action means that if you apply early to Notre Dame, we ask that you don't apply to any of those binding early decision schools along with
Right.
us. You can apply to early action schools, other non-binding programs, that's fine, just not those binding early decision plans. So we have restrictive early action. You can apply November 1st, or you can apply regular decision, which is January 3rd. No restrictions, certainly anywhere else. You can applying regular decision January 3rd. Now, in terms of admission, John, we do read applications the same, whether they are admitted early or regular decision. We don't give like extra weight or benefit for admission, whether you apply early or regular. We do read those in the same way. So we more encourage apply when you feel your application is going to be at its strongest. Essentially, if you want the extra time between November 1 or January 3rd to work on or strengthen your application, go ahead and take that time. But the one kind of caveat I would add, and I appreciate you bringing this up, is that we do give preference for merit scholarships to restrictive early action applicants.
Good to know.
Not to say regular decision applicants are ineligible. They are still
Hmm.
eligible,
Right.
but we do give preference to merit scholarships to the REA applicants. Yep. So good question.
Well, I appreciate that. And it goes to show that if you apply restrictive, that means that you're telling Notre Dame that you're not going to apply early decision to other institutions. So you're showing them a little bit of a commitment. And in turn, there is a preference in terms of the merit based side of things in the overall review. Do I have that right, Brendan?
Yes, that's correct. Exactly, John.
Well, we appreciate that. So, digging deeper in the overall review, can you walk us through your holistic admissions process? I love that word, holistic. And what specific qualities or experiences does Notre Dame value most in its applications?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you are going to hear the word holistic, about 1,000 times if you're going through the application process. So I'll kind of break it down a little bit into the different factors, both academic and non-academic, that we use to make admissions decisions. And I believe we may be going into a little more detail about some of these individual factors a little bit later on. But starting on the academic side, probably not a big surprise. Certainly looking at classroom performance, want to see students doing very well in all of their courses. We're also, in addition to your grades and classroom performance, looking at what we would call the academic rigor, or kind of the strength of curriculum that you're choosing to pursue. So certainly want to see students are challenging themselves with their course selection, in addition to doing very well in all of the classes. Academic piece, final piece would be standardized test scores, if those are included. We are currently a test optional institution. We are test optional this year, and we have committed to being test optional next year as well too. So that would be the SAT or the ACT if you do choose to include them, but they are not required to have a complete application. So academics certainly are going to be very important, but several non-academic factors are really just as important as part of our holistic process as well. That's kind of really what holistic means, is that we're not just going to be zeroing in on one area and using that to make an admissions decision. We're really looking at all of these factors together in concert with each other to make this decision. So non-academically, we are going to be looking at those activities. I mentioned that students at Notre Dame are a very passionate bunch, and we want to see that students are very involved in activities during their time in school. And certainly this is not only clubs and organizations in your high school, but also involvement in your large community, involved in service. You have a part-time job. You're involved in your parish or your church. You have significant family responsibilities. We want to know about that. Are you playing in a band with your friends on the weekend? We want to know about that, And I think kind of looking for a degree of just leadership and positive impact there. Hopefully, maybe you've risen to be a leader among your peers in some of these activities, but also a lot of those activities I mentioned, there are no formal leadership roles, but we do want to see positive impact. Are you leaving this organization better off because you were a part of it? Are
Right.
you kind of a valued member of whatever that you are doing? You're taking it seriously as part of it. So activities are very important. I then would highlight certainly essays, really good way to get to know you, your personal statement, as well as a few short answer supplements specific to Notre Dame. Good way to get to know more about your personality, your story, so we can get to know you better as a person. And then finally, we'll look at letters of recommendation. We require a teacher letter, recommend a counselor letter. So only one is required, although two is most common. Another good way to get to know more about who you are as a person in the classroom and outside of it as well too. So those are kind of the main factors John will use as part of our holistic review.
Well, we appreciate you giving a comprehensive overview of the main factors, and you broke it down, of course, by the academic portion and, of course, the non academic. So, digging even deeper, obviously, the transcript is a key component in terms of that academic review portion of the overall application. So, how does Notre Dame weigh course rigor versus GPA in the admissions process? In other words, not all GPAs are created equally. So, can you share what you look for when reviewing a student's transcript?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you use that phrase, "Not all GPAs are created equal," because I do get that question quite a bit. You probably do too, John. That's, "So what GPA do I need to get into Notre Dame?" And the
Right,
answer is,
right,
well, it depends, because, some
right.
schools, 4.0 scale, 5.0, 7, 100-point scale. In the Northeast, there are 11-point scales, anything you want. So it's all kind of very contextual as part of our review. We're gonna be looking at your performance, your GPA, within the context of your high school, but I think to answer your question, both performance and rigor are very important. They really do kind of have to go hand in hand in the process. We certainly are not just looking at one, and I wouldn't necessarily highlight that one is more important than the other. We really are kind of looking for students that I think are willing to work with their counselor each year to put together a schedule that is going to challenge them, I think ideally across a variety of different academic areas, and still be successful in those courses as well too. I should also highlight, similar to the GPA, the rigor is very dependent on the high school as well. Like, we're not looking for a set number of AP or honors courses. That really does vary based on the offerings of the school, but we want to see that within the context of your school, you are going to be challenging yourself, working with your counselor to put together that challenging coursework and schedule, I would say.
Well, we appreciate that. And I like to ask about institutional priorities. Can you share what is your institutional priority in terms of the number of freshmen you want to enroll as an incoming class and how many applications you actually receive?
Yeah, and this number has been pretty consistent for a while now, John. That typically our incoming first year class is going to be about 2,050 to 2,100 students. Generally, typically it's going to fall right about in that range. So last year we saw just shy of 30,000 applications. Of course, we do admit, we know not everyone we admit, unfortunately, is going to come to Notre Dame. So we did admit about 3,300 students. So our acceptance rate was about 11% last year overall, and then of that 3,300 number, about that 2,050 to 2,100 as part of our incoming freshman class. Certainly, we will bring in transfer students each year. So we end up with, I believe, just shy currently of 9,000 undergrads total, but that's about the size of the incoming first year class we shoot for each year.
Well, we appreciate that. So, the institutional priority is to have an incoming freshman class of approximately 2,100. You received just shy of 33,000 applications. You admitted approximately 3,300, which gave you that yield, right, of around 2,100 in terms of the freshman class. So, we really appreciate that insight. And I'd just like to share that data because I speak to parents and students all the time. Unfortunately, they may get rejected and they don't understand it. They say, I thought he had such a great essay. I don't know why he got rejected. And, sometimes it has nothing to do with the essay, or frankly, it has nothing to do with you, the student. It just has to do with the sheer numbers. Here we are talking about Notre Dame. We're looking at an incoming freshman class of approximately 2,100, and you're receiving just shy of about 33,000 applications. So look at those numbers, right? And I bet with 33,000 applications, if you knew that each of those students, if they were accepted, were coming in, you could probably fill six freshman classes out of that number if you knew that everyone who was applying would actually attend. So we just share that to give insight to the students and the parents. And of course, you mentioned it, but with Notre Dame being test optional, how should students decide whether or not to submit standardized test scores? In other words, how does the absence or presence of scores impact the review of the application, if it does at all?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, John, to ask, and one certainly I get frequently, because I know there is a lot of there is a lot of questions out there, certainly surrounding test optional. It's still, while many schools, of course, have been test optional for a long time, it certainly is more recent for many schools as well too. So it's one that I'm happy to address here, because Certainly, on our admissions website, like many schools, you can look up our middle 50% that we had for the SAT and the ACT last year. I do tend to caution students that since we did move to test optional, that number has risen higher than it was previously. As you can imagine, when students do submit their test scores, they tend to be a little higher than perhaps previously when they have the option not to submit them. So, while certainly I do think the middle 50% is there for a guide, I more encourage students to use kind of the personal barometer. Do you feel that this test score is an accurate reflection of your academic ability? Is this a score that you are proud of? Basically, is this a score that you want Notre Dame to use as part of our review? If so, go ahead and submit it. But if not, don't feel obligated to submit it, certainly by
Right.
any means, because
Right.
when I went through that holistic process earlier, as you could probably tell, we have a lot of data points that we're using
Hmm.
in order to make an admissions decision. So without a test score, we're still going to be doing a holistic, thorough, and accurate review of your application, certainly to the best of our ability. And I should also note as well, too, that outside of kind of the traditional SAT or ACT, there are other kind of ways, I think, to show like standardized testing performance, whether that is
Hmm.
like an AP exam score, IB exam score, if that's something that's offered, even sort of like honors and awards, like an AP Scholar, or perhaps like a
Right.
College Board Recognition Award or a Scholastic, Gold or Silver Key Award,
Hmm.
something like that, that I think can show too. So there are kind of multiple ways, I think, to demonstrate that academic ability from a standardized side outside of kind of the traditional SAT or ACT as well. But that's always kind of the barometer I encourage students to use. Like, for instance, when I'm working with an international student, that's a very different context, than
Right.
than other kinds of students
Right.
that may be applying to Notre Dame as well too. So I always kind of more use the do you feel again this is an accurate reflection of your ability that you want to be included with your application overall.
Well, you made a lot of great points there. So I just have to ask a follow up in terms of submitting AP scores or even IB. So at the time of the application, if a student has already taken, for example, an AP course and they have an AP test that's available, are you saying that your test flexible where if they want to submit those AP scores, they may or not?
Yes, if students do have AP exam scores, they are not required by any means to
Right.
send them in. But certainly, if they are scores kind of similar to, SAT or ACT, if they are
Hmm.
scores that you are proud of, and you want to be included, certainly we encourage you to send those in as well. Whether you do want to submit them officially or if you want to simply self report them on the application as well, too, we can
Right.
also use those. And we do accept self-reported SAT and ACT scores as well too. If students do not want to pay to send in the official scores as well, we can use those for application review purposes.
This is your host, John Durante, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome back Sean Patel, who's the founder and CEO of Prep Expert. Sean, welcome back.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. And I'm so excited to announce that Prep Expert is the official title sponsor of the College Admissions Process podcast. This has been a partnership in the works for a while now, and I'm so glad we got it off the ground. We're so excited to work with families, parents, students of the College Admissions Process podcast at Prep Expert to help them through our live online SAT and ACT courses not only improve their SAT and ACT scores, but help them get into college as well as win hundreds of thousands of dollars in college scholarships. Thank you so much for the partnership, and we are so excited to work with your families.
Thank you, Sean. And to learn more about how Prep Expert can support your child's academic journey, visit prepexpert.com today. And best wishes to all. Well, that's great to know. Thank you so much, Brendan, for that. And one last question regarding the testing conversation. Can you share the percentage of students that were admitted that did not submit standardized test scores?
Yeah. Of our incoming class, about a third came in without a test score. So it was
Great.
a pretty good, chunk of the class that were coming in without that SAT or ACT score,
Hmm.
about a third. And I'd say that's been fairly consistent the past few years that we've seen as a test optional institution.
Fantastic. And what about the personal statement? What could you tell us about perhaps some common pitfalls that students should avoid when writing those personal statements? And can you share examples of how a unique personal statement really helped elevate an application?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because when I was taking you through, the holistic review of an application earlier, the numbers are important. And of course, we're going to use those as part of our review, but we really do care about getting to know students as people as well, too. I think I don't just speak for myself, but probably some of my colleagues when I say that, reading a personal statement can often be a lot more interesting than looking at a transcript, when we're
Right.
getting to know
Right.
a student as part of the application review. So I would say when it comes to kind of like pitfalls that I think can make a personal statement a bit more of a missed opportunity is that we really do want these personal statements to be written in a very kind of genuine and authentic way that really does showcase a student's personality. So I think a couple of kind of like common, I think again of those pitfalls that I may see on the personal statement is first off, I would note that for many students, I do know it can be a little bit uncomfortable to write about yourself, to write from a first person perspective, but the personal statement is the time to do it. That's
Right.
when we really do
Right.
want
Don't
to
be
get to
shy.
know.
Don't be shy.
Please don't be shy. Yes, I'm going to steal a line from a colleague at a different university that I was traveling with. That when he said, "You can write an amazing essay about your grandmother and how much you admire her, but after reading it, I'm going to want to admit your grandmother and even get to know you." So you really do want to focus on yourself, not just kind of like a well written essay that you could submit as
Right.
part of your English class. So certainly showcasing your personality, whatever that may be, does matter. I also would highlight, John, too, that sometimes I think there's a misconception that you need to have had kind of like a world changing, event happen
Right.
to you to write an
Right.
effective college essay. And I can see students get very caught up on choosing a topic because they might be worried about, oh, this is a topic that they're going to see multiple times or they've seen before. Don't get too caught up on the topic. Choose the one that really is going to allow you to tell the best story about yourself, because I have definitely seen students that have chosen topics that I may have seen plenty of times
Hmm.
before, but they've made it unique to them, and that's really allowed them to stand out in the process. I'll give you, John, because you had asked about kind of like how a student elevated their application, I think, through this. I'll give you one of my favorite examples to use because I think it is taking a topic that I've seen many times, but it really
Right.
was unique to them and helped them. So a topic I will admit that I've seen before is a student that maybe tries out for a sports team, tries out for
Hmm.
a play. They don't get the part, they don't make the team, and what they learn from that experience, basically. So I'll
Right.
tell you, I'll try to make this quick here. But it was a student that wrote an essay that they really wanted to be part of their school musical, but they couldn't sing, they couldn't act, and they couldn't dance. But they really wanted to be part of their school musical. So I believe the play was Oklahoma. So they actually wrote their own part that was just going to be a
Wow.
cow that stood in the background of the musical, like all throughout. Didn't move, didn't talk, just a
Right.
cow
Right.
that sat there. She started like a poster campaign throughout the school. She
That's
tried out
awesome.
for like a very confused, apparently, theater board in this homemade cow costume that they made. And ultimately, John, they decided to add the cow to the play, but
That's awesome.
they cast someone else to be the cow. They didn't
No
cast
way.
her. No, they
Wow.
cast this big, like, football player to fill out this costume. So again, gist of the story, she tried out and didn't get the part, but clearly she's the only person in the world that could have written that essay, and like
That's awesome.
we've all had those unique experiences, and I would really encourage students to kind of think again, not about the topic, but what's going to allow me to tell a story like that about myself. So that's what I love to use, John.
So she had a unique story. She really tried hard to get into that play, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, she fell short. So, Brendan, was she admitted to Notre Dame?
John, she was admitted to Notre Dame, but I'm not going to go any further if she
That's
chose to
fine.
attend Notre Dame, but she was admitted to Notre Dame.
Fantastic. Well, thank you
One
for sharing that. I appreciate
Absolutely.
it. And
One of my biggest failures as an admissions counselor now, not getting her at Notre Dame.
that's awesome. That's awesome. But many schools, as you know, like Notre Dame, ask applicants to submit those things that we call the supplemental essays.
Yeah.
So, how many supplemental essays does Notre Dame require? And what are you looking for in the supplemental that is not found so easily in other parts of the overall application?
Yeah, terrific question. And we require students to answer a total of four short answer supplemental questions. One is required that every student will attend, and then we'll give five additional options, and you'll choose the three topics that kind of stand out most to you, and you'll respond there. So it is a good deal of questions, but they're very brief, right around like 50 to 100 words that you're going to be responding to. So it definitely does really encourage you to get to the meat of your response when you are going to be answering these questions. But I would highlight, certainly similar to the personal statement, this is a good way for us to get to know you better as well, too, to highlight your passions, your personality. But you mentioned this a little bit earlier, John. I'm glad that you did, because I do think on the supplementary portion, that's also kind of a good way for you to also get to know a little bit more about Notre Dame's values and our mission, and for you to kind of be able to express why you think kind of Notre Dame is uniquely a good fit for you. So this is also kind of like a time on the application where you do kind of get to reflect on like what Notre Dame values, our mission, and kind of a little bit of expressive showing why you kind of feel, again, uniquely Notre Dame could be a good fit for you, why you're a good fit for Notre Dame. And I think that applies to many schools as well too, that we're kind of using that supplementary portion to see if there is kind of that good match between university and applicant. Not to say the rest of the application we don't use for that as well, but this is a little bit more of a direct way of getting into that question, I would say.
Well, that's a fantastic answer. And, you talked about really demonstrating your understanding of the values of the university, the mission of the university, express why, for example, Notre Dame is unique to you, why you would want to be there. I said it earlier and I'll repeat again because I think it's important. It's a nuanced thing, right? Like it's
Mhm.
it's a little different than the personal statement, which many students they spend a lot of time on the personal statement, and frankly, they use the same one for multiple schools, which is
Sure.
fine.
Yeah, yeah.
I would not recommend that with the supplemental. With the supplemental, you're really students trying to demonstrate your understanding of the institution, the specific institution, the missions, the values, the philosophies of Notre Dame. How are they in line with who you are? What have you done in high school to demonstrate how you're in line with their mission, their philosophies, their values? Why Notre Dame? Why is it unique to you and your beliefs? And frankly, if you could also include in there, and it's easier said than done, how you plan on contributing to the amazing Notre Dame University, which has a 98% retention rate. If you could do all of that, you're definitely going to get people's attention. Would you agree, Brandon?
I think that's a really great way of summing it up, John. Absolutely. I think that really is very helpful. And certainly, I can promise, because I know students do put a lot of time,
Sure.
into the personal statement, into the supplementary questions, that they very much are an important part of our review. Don't worry. We are real people. We are reading every one, of those words
Exactly.
that you're writing. And we definitely do take it seriously. And I think, John, that's a wonderful way of summing up the supplementary
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And you're right. There are no guarantees. And I think that goes to the point that there's a lot of things that you do control in the college process, students and parents, but there's also a lot of things that you don't control. We talked briefly about institutional priorities earlier, where your incoming freshman class is approximately 2,100. You're receiving just shy of 33,000 applications. Students, you don't control what the institutional priority is in terms of the freshman class and how many applications are received. What you do control is understanding the nuance, the differences between what they're looking for on a transcript, an activity sheet, a personal statement, and in fact, that's supplemental. And so the personal statement, which I know a lot of people spend a lot of time on, that is something that you can use for multiple schools, but it would be a mistake to spend a lot of time on Notre Dame's four supplemental essays and then share your understanding of their values, their mission, philosophy, and then you take that and you use those same essays for, ABC college, XYZ college. That would be a mistake because it really is where you need to demonstrate your understanding of that specific institution. Now, you mentioned earlier also the teacher letter of recommendation, and I was just curious because I know that there's a lot of school counselors that listen, but also teachers. Can you share an example of a letter of recommendation that stood out and perhaps maybe talk about something that people shouldn't do when they're writing those letters? I was just curious.
Yeah, and one thing I would note, John, for any students or parents listening out there as well, too, that for our required teacher letter of recommendation, that does need to come from a core subject area.
Hmm.
So math, science, English, social studies, foreign language. That's kind of where the required teacher letter would need to come from. And I actually would give kind of somewhat similar advice, I think, for the teacher letter of recommendation, similar to the personal statement, that it is always a little bit more impactful if it is kind of a story driven letter, if it is
Hmm.
not only kind of listing the adjectives that kind of define the student, but if you are able to point to like a specific example that does kind of illustrate how you are describing the student, that really tends to stand out to us, I would say, in the application process when we're looking at a letter of recommendation. I would also say a question I get quite a bit is like, is there a preferred format? Bullet points, paragraphs, what that looks like. There, I promise there really isn't.
Right.
Whatever kind of works
Right.
best for you. I know, especially counselors, you may be writing a lot of letters of recommendation. If you want to use bullet points, that's just fine with us. It's totally fine. But if you are kind of again able to like provide specific examples or stories that I think really do highlight the personal qualities that you're listing in the letter, that can be very impactful in the admissions process, I would say, from our perspective.
Well, that's great insight. And, someone recently shared with me that one of their favorite teacher letters of recommendation that they felt added a lot to the overall application. First of all, they said, you don't want a teacher who's going to just repeat what's on the transcript. You
Mhm.
don't want a teacher to repeat what's on the activity sheet, right? Because that's a missed opportunity. But someone said that the teacher, to your point, told a story very specific that when they when they plan their lessons, when they're thinking about that student, Brendan, they have to think of the follow up questions and they really have to take into account the insights that the student Brendan, is going to have in their class when they're, writing their lesson plan. I thought that was
Mhm.
so impactful. And,
Yeah.
when I heard the person share that example, it really, gave me insight in terms of who that student is, and it's not something that's so easily found again on an activity sheet or a transcript. So, Brendan, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I can't thank you enough. Before I get to my last question, I have to ask, are there any questions that I didn't ask, or frankly, a topic that I didn't bring up that you'd like to leave with us now?
Yeah, John, I just think one other kind of piece of advice, because we talked a little bit about pitfalls when it came to the personal statement.
Hmm.
One area that I do kind of want to highlight a little bit, because I think I've seen over the past couple of years that this has been a little bit of a missed opportunity for some of the applications that I've been reading, is on the activities section. I think not only, as I mentioned, can activities encompass many different things that you may be
For
doing
sure.
in your school, outside of the school, those really do all count. But on the application itself, you are able to list, the name of the activity, any sort of like, title that you might have, for instance. But there's also just a brief, like free text box underneath it
Hmm.
as well, too. I would really encourage you to use that box because, just seeing the name of an organization doesn't tell us the whole story,
Right.
So really kind of using that as an opportunity to perhaps explain more about the why that you were involved, with that organization, an impact that perhaps you made, about that, just so
Great.
we can get
Great
to know,
points.
because that could be a nice way to learn more about your personality, and your story through there as well, too. So if I do ever see an application that's just listing again the name of, five or six activities on there with no further description, that's a bit of a
Right.
missed opportunity for me. So that's one piece of advice that I would give related to the application we haven't talked about, I would say.
Well, I appreciate that. And we talk a lot about the missed opportunities. And the point you're making is, students, you really need to use all the space that's on the application. So, to Brendan's point, if you're just listing the activities, it's really not saying much.
Yeah.
Did you take on any leadership roles or any initiatives? You have to give whatever you can in the space provided. Otherwise, you're leaving it up to the admissions representative to speculate in terms of what you did, if you did anything at all. So you have to be very mindful and understand that every part of the application has a very specific task in terms of what it's telling the admissions rep. And you have to understand that each part is building on the next to create the overall application, the overall marketing package, if you will. So I really appreciate those insights, Brandon. This has been phenomenal. Like I said, unfortunately, it does lead us to that last question, which is, what are your top three pieces of advice that you would provide a student and their families getting ready for the college admissions process?
Yeah. And I think I'll try to pull together a lot of the threads that we've been discussing throughout this conversation here. But I think the first one, John, would be to be yourself, be authentic throughout the process. Really don't try to kind of ever focus on like, what do you think? Myself, my colleague, whether at Notre Dame or elsewhere, what do we want to see? Really focus on being who you are in the process, and that kind of authenticity really is going to shine through
So
in your
important. Great
application
point.
100%. So being yourself is very important. Secondly, I would also just say give yourself plenty of time on the application as well. Kind of like we've talked about, writing this personal statement, writing your activities. It can take time. It can be something that can be very difficult to do the night before an
Right.
application is due. Oftentimes, this
Hmm.
personal statement is probably going to go through a few drafts, if I had to guess. So certainly, starting that. Oftentimes, even being able to start that like this summer before your senior year, perhaps working on that, so you don't need to be balancing your application with your schoolwork. And that's
Right.
going to be demanding a lot of your time. So giving yourself plenty of time to work on the application, I would say, is going to be very important as well. And then I would say, a third piece of advice would probably be, and I think this goes along a little bit about kind of like being yourself, is also making sure that you are taking the time to kind of research those universities that you're interested in as well too. Like John, we talked about earlier, when you're filling in like these supplemental questions, it
Hmm.
definitely does help to have an understanding of the universities that you are applying to as well. So, kind of understanding like their values and their mission. But also, I would just kind of point out that there are so many amazing universities out there
Hmm.
as well
For
too, that
sure.
it definitely helps you to not kind of like, put all of your eggs in that one basket as well too, but taking the time getting to know multiple schools, because I bet you're going to find a few different schools that you would be really proud to call home, during the
Absolutely.
college admissions process. And that's always very helpful, I think, to have, multiple schools that you're going to be really happy with as you're going through the admissions process. So that would probably be my final piece of advice that I would give there, John.
That's awesome. And those are great pieces of advice. And we always remind the students and their families that there are over 4,000 colleges and universities in the United States alone. There are multiple schools that are the right fit for each and every student, but not every school is the right fit for you. So, for all the reasons that we talked about and more, it's very important to come up with a list of reach schools, target schools, safety schools, and really try to enjoy the process. And I appreciate that you talked about time, right? Take your time getting the applications in. And frankly, if you can, get them in early, students, so that you could enjoy that once in a lifetime senior year of
Mhm.
high school. Brendan, this was phenomenal. Notre Dame is so lucky to have you, as were we today. I can't thank you enough. And I'm going to ask you to come back. So we're going to bring you back here soon. Okay.
Done.
Fantastic. Well, again, your time, your expertise, we really appreciate it, Brandon. You were awesome.
Thank you very much, John. Really appreciate you all listening. Appreciate you having me. Go Irish. Thanks a lot.
Go Irish, absolutely. And to everyone out there, good luck with the college search. Take care, all, and best wishes. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The CAP, the College Admissions Process Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please don't forget to tell a friend and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, John Durante, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The CAP. Hey, podcast friends, if you've been enjoying the College Admissions Process Podcast, I'm excited to share my new book, Straight from the Admissions Office, Insider Strategies for College Applications. It's packed with insights and tips from over 250 podcast episodes with admissions professionals designed to make the college process less overwhelming. Whether you're a student, parent, or college counselor, it's a valuable resource for navigating the admissions process. By grabbing a copy, you're also helping to support the podcast. The links are in the show notes. Thank you, and best wishes to all with the college admissions process.